A good album cover really grabs your attention, makes you wonder if the music inside sounds as good as it looks. While scrolling through YouTube, I wasn't exactly sure what this was, besides an homage to the Virtual Boy. But it looked interesting enough to merit a click, and the song inside was indeed good enough to merit a listen. It's a great shame that I stopped there, and didn't explore the album further, but I at least made sure to download it. Years later, while going through my library, it popped up on shuffle again. And this time, that exciting blend of rock and stage musical had me craving more. I found the full EP, A Beginner's Guide to Faking Your Death by Jhariah. Released in 2021, it's a bit of a strange case. 3 out of 8 songs are holdovers from a previous EP, To Mend the Sun. Debt Collector was originally meant to release on the deluxe edition of Mend the Sun as Lie Lie Lie, but it didn't pan out. It was composed alongside 2 other songs, Flight of the Crows and Needed a Change of Pace, as singles. The first track, as stated in an interview, was originally written for a different album as well. Only the 7th track, Bad Luck, was intentionally written as part of Beginner's Guide. Nevertheless, despite being a collection of originally unrelated songs, Jhariah has said that they realized retroactively it had formed a cohesive narrative. He's no stranger to concept albums. After all, their first release follows The Last Man Standing, after a cult brainwashes the last survivors of an apocalypse. Pretty heavy stuff for a debut. Beginner's Guide is pretty open with its concept, the tale of a man who fakes his death to escape from his past, and the consequences involved. After 2 deep dives about Will Wood, I was inspired to explore Beginner's Guide, given that the 2 artists have some stylistic similarities, and have a history of collaboration. However, I couldn't have done it without the true experts here. The wonderful people of the Jhariah and Friends Discord shared their knowledge with me, especially JhariahJournal on Twitter and bennward on Discord. Jhariah, while a bit cryptic, has also released bits of trivia across social media, so I'll defer to the creator first, then the experts, then my own personal interpretation. That being said, if you like the music and feel this album speaks to you, feel free to interpret the story as you wish. I originally thought it was about a breakup before doing more research, which means this could have been a very different video. As always, I recommend giving the album a listen before you watch the video. I'm flattered that you're so eager to watch, but I think it's best to familiarize yourself with the music first, before analyzing it. Also, make sure to be respectful of the original artist, and when you're done, consider one of the other fine albums in their discography. With that, let's begin. I don't mean to blindly praise this album, because there are a few songs I'm not as fond of. But what a way to start it! Piano explodes on the scene, somewhat reminiscent, to me at least, of the famous opening to Ali's Wild Side. Drums and xylophone creep up on the sides, before synthetic strings sweep in with a dramatic flourish, setting the stage for our lead actor. Jhariah's music is often packaged with the tagline, "No genre, all drama." They try to make a sound that can't be pinned down by a single genre, which makes it not at all difficult to describe. If I had to, though, the word Broadway would definitely be in there somewhere. We're introduced to the central conflict. Our narrator, known by fans as the protagonist, has a plan to fake his death. That don't sound like me. I don't think I'm not. But why leave it all behind in pursuit of a fresh start? He insists it's not something wrong with him, that you just don't know the context. After declaring a start to the story, he apologizes for the mess. To the audience, the album is likened to a stage play, with the actors and stagehands rushing to get everything ready, despite being understaffed. Boy, do I know that feeling. I remember shows back in my theater kid days, where actors went missing, sets were falling down, and entire monologues were skipped. In Universe, however, the protagonist feels rushed, unprepared for his plan, despite being dead set on going through with it. True to its theatrical leanings, this song is an overture for the rest of the album. After the verse, we hear the leitmotif of track 2, Needed a Change of Pace, before transitioning into a medley of lyrics from throughout the album, Bad Luck, Change of Pace, and Flight of the Crows, before ending on a spectacular high note. Short and sweet, it's a perfect appetizer. No notes. I know in the past I've covered albums in their listed order, but this time I've rearranged things a bit. According to JhariahJournal, the meat of the album is Flight of the Crows, Needed a Change of Pace, Debt Collector, and Bad Luck, in that order. Fitting, considering the other 3 songs are the aforementioned re-releases from To Mend the Sun. Therefore, I'll be covering the new songs in chronological order, rather than track listing, with the others interspersed throughout. There's an argument to be made that Jhariah's creative vision demands having Flight of the Crows be last, as if it's some big Christopher Nolan style reveal, but I'm sure it'll be fine. One thing to note, Beginner's Guide takes place in the same universe as Mend the Sun and The Great Tale of How I Ruined It All, but I've also been told that the protagonist is a separate person from the preceding narrator, the pianist. With that in mind, I'll just evaluate the album's story on its own merits. We begin our story with a conversation. The protagonist tries to excuse himself from the company of another, a woman, who we're informed is a loved one, or at least she regards the protagonist as one. From the get-go, we see the foundations of tragedy. The narrator assumes he's overstayed his welcome, despite her insistence that she enjoys his company. Nevertheless, he leaves, ignoring her affirmations. And as he walks off into the night, he's made up his mind that he has no intentions of returning. Tonight is the night he fakes his death. The protagonist acknowledges that what he does will hurt those who love him, but believes it's for the best. They'll get over it, slowly letting go of their love for him, and soon, everyone will be better off for it. He wants to keep on living, but he needs his current self to die, to be forgotten. As long as this image exists in people's minds, and people's hearts, his plan will ultimately fail. The song gets its title from the line, "Let those old memories go, feed me till I grow." At first, he's victorious. Whoever the protagonist was before is gone, at least in his own eyes. It's time for his second chance, to live in the sun under a new name. Musically, I hate to say it, but it's probably my least favorite. The verses rely on continuously rising notes, broken up by low notes for contrast. It's interesting, but just not my thing. The chorus is pretty solid, but it's so little of the song by comparison. I mean, I like the little fluty part before the last chorus, at least. You may be wondering, why 3? Well, the first Pressure Bomb was on Mend the Sun, and a remastered version was released as part of a fundraiser to repair broken audio equipment. That version, Pressure Bomb 2, is included on this album as a bonus track, along with this one, an even newer remix. From what I can tell, it's the same lyrics, so I'll cover it all in one. Also, keep in mind that the narrator of Pressure Bomb and the live tracks is technically separate from the protagonist, by virtue of these songs being written for different projects. The titular Pressure Bomb is the singer's mind, a source of stress in their life. It moves much too fast for them or anyone else to keep up with, turning even the most mundane tasks into a chore. If this sounds at all familiar, you or a loved one may be diagnosed with ADHD. The song isn't explicitly about it, but it's hard to look up any sort of analysis without someone making the comparison. This constant overstimulation means the singer can't slow down or stop to take a breather. As someone who also may or may not have ADHD, I'd relate it to a layover at an airport. Logically, it makes sense that they need to get everyone there in time for the flight. that planes need time to refuel and restock before moving on to the next destination. But you, the passenger, are sitting there wanting to go home. Minutes stretch on into hours, hours into days, and it's agonizing to just sit there helpless. Rest doesn't come easy with a brain that actively resists it, but that's just how you're built. Pressure Bomb yearns for some reprieve, either for life to move at our own pace, for us to be able to slow down, or for someone to be able to help. But time neither slows down nor speeds up for anyone, nor can you change who you are. The singer chooses to go it alone, believing that they can't ask for help, even if they are unequipped to handle the pressure. They wouldn't want to, anyway. The song's composition brilliantly reflects its subject matter. When describing his racing mind, the singer speeds up frantically, as the piano and drums either cut out or accelerate to match. Later on, after waxing poetic about the man he wishes he could be, the music stops and then returns slowly. For once in the song, we actually do slow down. But what's changed? There's someone else singing as well. That would be Indigo Hope Fenimore, one of the collaborators on this album. It shows that when you work with someone and open up to them, they actually can help you take things slow. But as soon as she cuts out, we return back to the Pressure Bomb. Now, we return to our original protagonist. He has gone through with his plan, and basks in the new life he has built for himself. It was this song that got me into Jhariah, and is a strong contender for the best on the album. It shares that seat with Debt Collector and the intro, though Pressure Bomb 3 is pretty good as well. I'm not sure why the back half of the album doesn't speak to me as much, but I've never been a fan of live songs, so maybe that's it. One cool thing this song does is segmenting the instrumentals into sections, accompanied by Jhariah ramping up the intensity of his vocals. We start with a droning synth, before adding a guitar riff and a pulsating percussive bass. The chorus finally lets loose, with trumpets and an echo effect on their voice, making Jhariah's presence seem larger, somehow triumphant and yet regretful in tone. After all, that tone is what the song is going for. We get a glimpse of the protagonist's old life being filled with burdens, a sense that he never belonged. He can't understand why the people in his life loved him, knowing as much about him as they did, in hopes that their love for him can die with his old identity. Note that we only ever hear this story through the eyes of the protagonist. Someone who would fake their death to escape their past doesn't seem like the most stable point of reference. What we can trust is that, despite how baffling he finds it, the protagonist was loved, and he knows that his death will hurt them. The song flips back and forth on whether or not the protagonist actually feels remorse for what he has done. He states clearly, multiple times, that it was all a game to him. He wasn't afraid to lie to his loved ones, and feels no need to apologize. But the tone of the song, his worry that they still love him, it speaks to a hidden regret that he doesn't want to acknowledge. This comes to a head at the end. He finally breaks down crying, only to whisper, "and scene." Continuing the theatrical illusions, even his sadness was all an act for the audience. One last remark about the music. The fade out from the first chorus into the second verse starts employing more chiptune sound, as well as a Jack Stauber-esque pitch shift. In the music video too, around this part, Jhariah gets more pixelated to match. Nothing of analytical significance, just pretty cool. Whose Line Is It Anyway? Is a series of game shows from 1988 onward, in which actors improvise according to different prompts. Now, that little factoid has almost no bearing on the meaning of the song, but it is where it gets its title from. The other allusion is the phrase eye for an eye, which occurs several times in the Old Testament, the first being in Exodus. It's a common shorthand for revenge. You take my eye, I take your eye. The song is weighing whether or not revenge is worthwhile. If you've been slighted, your first impulse is to get back at those who did you wrong.
My head is overflowing with these thoughts that if I return the favor you might understand.
Revenge is a way of making them feel the pain they inflicted upon you. But as the singer states in the next line, there's no guarantee it would make them feel the same pain as the damage they've done. Payback is a slippery slope, and if everyone is taking each other's eyes for what they've done to each other, we'll all end up blind. The singer worries that seeking vengeance will destroy him as well as his enemy, that any amount of satisfaction won't be enough to bring him the peace he seeks. This track is led around by its drums, which I'll attribute to it being a live performance. I know I attributed my ambivalence towards this track to my overall dislike of live songs, but I decided to give the original a listen, and I'll concede that this is an improvement. The instrumentation in the version in Mend the Sun sounds more artificial, and at times doesn't mesh as well with Jhariah's vocals as it does here. If it was change of pace that got me into this album, it was Debt Collector that inspired me to do a video on it. It's not very long, but makes one hell of an impact in its 2 minutes and 32 seconds. The hardest rocker on the album, a chiptune intro of piano and drums, is silenced by electric guitar that just, wow. That confidence has lasted the protagonist for a good 2 songs, but now doubt is beginning to creep back in. You see, our dear narrator's plan has some fatal flaws. First, he was blind to the fact that people in his life still loved him regardless of his issues. He kept expecting them to discover some shocking secret, and ended up giving them a reason by faking his death. The second major issue is that, for all his perceived flaws, he expected his problems would just go away by starting fresh. And yet, even if his old identity is gone, his mind remains. The masquerade can only be kept up so long before he gets caught. He incurred a debt by leaving his life, hurting others, giving them no explanation, no apology, no closure. Now, if or when they find out, he'll have hell to pay. Unlike most other songs, Debt Collector is not sung from the perspective of the protagonist, but rather sung to him, shaming him for his actions. We don't quite know if his plan has fallen apart yet, or if this is simply anxiety that it will. But it seems he was far too hasty for his own good. Throughout this track, the piano and drums take turns leading the melody. The chorus is so important to this song, apparently, that it appears 4 times, begins the song, and makes its way into the title. By the end, you'll certainly remember this song as the one where Jhariah says, "for granted," 1,000 times. That and "Take Me Down."
I don't take the sea for granted. It could try any side at once. I don't take the sky for granted. It could fall anytime it pleases.
To take for granted is a warning to the listener, presumably some subject within the story of Mend the Sun. From what JhariahJournal tells me, Mend the Sun and Great Tale told the story of the pianist, a survivor turned revolutionary against a rising cult. I'd assume the original subject was the leader of the cult, warning against the pianist taking them down. However, I haven't researched this story enough to say for certain that it's not the other way around. Question for another time. The warning, regardless of the subject, is not to take the singer for granted. They value the sea, the sky, the land, for nature can be unpredictable and dangerous. Just the same, the listener shouldn't take the singer for granted. What he can do, what his absence could do. Does the listener really want to find out what happens? There's an implication of history between these two, as with Who's I, that this is perhaps a friend that the listener has hurt. Some interpret these filler tracks as part of the album's overall story, and I can see it. The protagonist having a pressure bomb of a head could be one reason they feel they need to get away. His loved ones have seen his past behavior as a result. The hurt and angry but ultimately merciful singer could be one of the protagonist's loved ones. He certainly deserves worse for faking his death, and they could easily get revenge or abandon him, but they're willing to simply warn him, remind him not to play with their heart. The protagonist lost. The vagueness of this song and Debt Collector leave us unsure if he was actually found out by the people from his old life, or if he simply realized what a mistake he's made. But whatever happened, he's alone now. He was so sure his plan would work, but he accepts his failure for what it is. Faking his death was a gamble, and this time it didn't work out. It's not just bad luck. It's as much his fault as it was misfortune. All he can do now is warn the audience not to make the same mistakes he has, and especially not to think yourself above failure. He's even aware that what he did was wrong, objectively, admitting that he got what he deserved. The outro to the song, and to the story as a whole, is very telling of the true character of the protagonist. He reached for the sky, burning his wings in the process, and now those that would have loved him are looking down, passing judgment. In previous songs, he expressed desire for his loved ones to stop loving him, hating that they still clung to this idea of who he was. Now that he's gotten what he wants, something changes.
Not sorry, but thank you for enduring me as long as you did.
There's still this detachment, this apathy, but there's also a gratitude that he did have their love, at least for a while. One thing to note is that among the story songs, Flight of the Crows is the only one out of order. JhariahJournal placed it at the very beginning, but in the official tracklist, it comes right after Bad Luck. By the end of this song, while admitting he was in the wrong, the protagonist hasn't learned his lesson. He admits that he'd do it again, and fails to learn that people would have loved him, seeing it instead as enduring him. The cycle may repeat again, with the next track being both the beginning to this tale, as well as the beginning of the next. A self-destructive cycle the protagonist will continue to find himself in, until he learns to grow. Musically, this song is a pattern we've grown used to. Quiet, simpler sections, contrasted with booming, bombastic choruses. But the outro deserves special mention, not just for wrapping up the story with a nice bow, but for hosting an angelic performance from Jhariah, on both piano and vocals. He delivers the gentlest high notes, and the most ominous low notes. I would compare it to Rhapsody in Blue, but I don't know much orchestral music, so let me know if there's a better comparison. That about wraps up the album's story, but there's one last piece of evidence I neglected to mention thus far. When asked about the meaning of Flight of the Crows, Jhariah answered on their story, and I quote, "It's about wanting change and mutating in weird ways, and dreaming of going into a cocoon and coming out as something beautiful." Throughout this video, I've been explaining the album in literal terms, the result of a man faking his death to escape the person he was. But, for a moment, let's ponder the metaphorical side of things. The protagonist is a man unsatisfied with himself. It was never about the people in his life. He wanted a second chance, a fresh start, but worried that his attachments wouldn't let his old identity die. At least, not in their eyes. In either interpretation, he chooses to die for himself, with the hope that those who love the old him will let go, let him move on to the place he's meant to be. But the story takes on a lighter tone, though still tragic. If we interpret this death as change, we often like to hold on to the way things are, wanting everything to stay the same, for fear of losing what we hold dear. We tend to do that with people as well, not wanting to lose the things we love about them. But change is a natural part of life, and it's a healthy thing to grow as a person over time. People in your life may not be happy with those changes, but you can't deny parts of yourself for the sake of others. As the protagonist embraces these changes, he sees in the mirror that the person he used to be is dead and gone. When next he sees the woman at the beginning, she'll be shocked to find the person she knew and loved is gone. Dead, in a manner of speaking. With the rest of the album in context, this process isn't as painless as the protagonist expected, as not everyone is as accepting as he would have hoped. Nevertheless, as Bad Luck states, he's not sorry for embracing himself, for becoming the person he was meant to be. Even if he has happy memories of those people in his life, the fact that they wouldn't accept him for who he truly is leaves a tinge of sadness. Regardless of which theory you hold to be true, or if you have your own interpretation of this album, I hope you enjoyed this video. I've been wanting to make it for a while, but I had heard many tales about the complicated Jhariah lore. The last thing I wanted to do was rush into things, but I'm thankful for the help I got in putting the pieces together. Even if I have my favorites, Beginner's Guide is a fantastic album from start to finish, and it's absolutely worth a listen or two. If you have any theories of your own about the album, or suggestions about what I should cover next, feel free to let me know. Until next time, thank you for watching.